Hello and welcome to Counterpunch Radio. My name's Eric Draitzer. Thanks so much for tuning in, for coming back. First-time listeners, always try to extend a warm welcome to all of you guys. Regular listeners, I really appreciate it. I've gotten some feedback recently. I think I got back to everybody that I could. But if you have tried to reach me and you haven't gotten me, please do send another email or get me on Facebook, Twitter, whatever you want to do. Of course, I always encourage that, not simply for the interactive nature of it, but I do think of Counterpunch as a project that is in some senses collaborative. It's a space that we do have online where we can air out our issues, where we can provide critical perspectives, where we can debate, where we can discuss in the form of articles, in the form of this podcast, and in any other way, online, social media, and so forth. And I think that Counterpunch is really important in that regard, especially given everything that's going on. And I know I've said that pretty much every episode, but I think it's true. So if you agree with that, please consider getting a subscription to the print magazine. Yes, Counterpunch is a freaking dinosaur and is still printing on paper, and it's great, and I love that. So please consider getting that subscription. It's a great way to support Counterpunch, to keep this whole thing going. Of course, the website is updated every single day with tons of new content, and of course, you can also give a donation via PayPal or any of the other ways that people do such things. So any way that you can support it, it's always appreciated. And of course, if you want to get more of my work, you can go to my other, I guess you could call it my other hub, my other platform on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Eric Draitzer. Lots more podcasts and essays and articles and photos and other things there. So please do that as well. Anyway, I want to turn to my guest today. I'm super excited to have him on the show. I've been following his work for a long time. I'm a big fan of it, and I know that a lot of you guys are as well. It's Barrett Brown. He's here to talk about a number of issues, but who is Barrett Brown? He is a journalist, most importantly, the founder of the Pursuance Project. You can go to the website, pursuanceproject.org. We're going to be talking a lot about that and a bunch of other stuff. You can follow him on Twitter at BarrettBrown_. Out of the way, Barrett Brown, welcome to Counterpunch Radio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming on, and thank you for all of the work that you do. So before we get into that, before we get into Pursuance and some of the other things that we're going to talk about today, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe where some people may have heard of you, how you've come into the spotlight. What should we know about Barrett Brown?
I was a pretty typical, struggling, turn-of-the-century freelance journalist starting out as a young man. Ended up writing for Vanity Fair, The Guardian, New York Press, a number of other outlets. And as time went on, I grew more and more disenchanted with mere journalism, as in journalism, as a sole arbiter or sole remediator of problems within a complex republic. It occurred to me that even as I was growing more successful and had more reach, my impact was minimal. I mean, I wrote, amusing, interesting commentary sometimes, but it had no real effect on anything. And that's true for, I think, a lot of journalists. And so I grew more open to experiment. And so I got involved with Anonymous in late 2010, right when they were getting involved in the Tunisian revolution. There was a number of anonymous participants who were actually Tunisian nationals in country. And this was a very novel and successful campaign they ran to help the democratic revolution in Tunisia, to assist it by various means, including attacks on the Tunisian government's sort of cyber intelligence infrastructure. And from there on, I was very much committed to pursuing this, to helping to push it forward, expand it, defend this new kind of emergent activism. And things proceeded, and I got involved in this other sort of running conflict between us and the U.S. government and several other governments and a number of private intelligence contracting firms. And in the process of exposing some of their plots, some of which got quite a bit of media coverage when they came out, particularly the one by which they sought to go after WikiLeaks and Glenn Greenwald and other journalists and left-wing activist groups, we became the target of an FBI investigation, among other things. And so I ended up going to prison over all this and then got out in late 2016.
And ever since you've gotten out, you've been moving forward with this new project called Pursuance, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, because I think it's a really exciting project, and there's a lot of aspects to it for us to kind of investigate. But before we do that, I do think it would be important for us to discuss this issue of your involvement with WikiLeaks and with Assange, and where that has gone, or how that's evolved, or maybe we could say devolved. And I think a lot of people will have seen a recent story. This came out in the Daily Beast just a few days ago from when we're recording, dated August 13th. Headline: Julian Assange went after a former ally. It backfired epically. So I don't want to summarize the story, obviously, and I want to get to sort of the nitty-gritty of that, but let's just back up a second. Your involvement with WikiLeaks was what exactly, and your direct involvement or non-involvement with Assange, just so that we can understand how you're connected to WikiLeaks.
Right. So very early on, even before I got involved with Anonymous, I was very much an early proponent of WikiLeaks, to an extent that I was sometimes called on to talk on radio programs about WikiLeaks, because there were very few journalists who were that interested in it early on. I was very much inspired by this new sort of phenomenon of these small groups of individuals working globally and using the internet in entirely new ways, by which to impose transparency on governments, or disrupt criminal or corrupt activities by institutions. And that was an exciting thing for me, and it very much led me to create my own group, Project PM, which later turned into an investigation, sort of a crowdsourced investigation into these intelligence contracting firms that Anonymous had hacked and exposed. And so over the next couple of years, the main thing I was known for was my investigation into these companies that had worked for the DOJ and the FBI and Booz Allen Hamilton, among other things, to go after WikiLeaks and to go after WikiLeaks supporters. And so when this came out, after it came out, I continued to very doggedly pursue the people that were responsible, because the people responsible, of course, since they were so close to the U.S. government, didn't really suffer any consequences. And I went after them so aggressively that the FBI, felt the necessity to go after me in turn. And so that was reflected in the search warrant that was executed on my home and apartments in March 6, 2012. That search warrant is available on BuzzFeed, and it lists these same firms that I've been investigating over their attacks on WikiLeaks. So, and then later on, one of the things I was actually charged with was this Stratfor hack that had been done by Jeremy Hammond and a few other individuals that I knew, and in which had yielded even more emails about this privatized intelligence industry that's works very much intertwined with the U.S. government and other governments abroad. And that was a leak that ultimately went to WikiLeaks, and that was in part because several of us were arguing after the hack had occurred that those emails should go to WikiLeaks, since they would be in a better position to ensure that they had an impact. And so when I went to prison, the WikiLeaks factor was widely reported as being an aspect of this. Now, I'd never had any direct contact with Assange myself. People I worked with had. I was never a WikiLeaks volunteer as such. I had been invited to go through the Stratfor documents on their server at some point right before I went to prison, but never actually did that. So I was never a WikiLeaks person as such. We had our own thing going on, but it was oftentimes in defense of WikiLeaks. So that being the case, I obviously did not feel any obligations to WikiLeaks upon getting out of prison, since I had gone to prison in large part because of it. And so about the year after I got out, I understood that there was a lot of new concerns about Assange and about WikiLeaks' role in that last election. Some of these concerns were the same concerns people have always had about the way Assange operates. Some of them were new. I did not oppose the releasing of the DNC and DCCC emails, because that was an appropriate thing for a leaking organization to do. What I was uncomfortable with from the very beginning, getting out 2016, was this bizarre alliance with alt-right figures. Some of the obvious the thing, even before some of the leaks later came out, the leaks that showed that Assange and or other WikiLeaks personnel had approached the Trump campaign and assisted them, and in some ways conspired with them. Even before that, it was clear that that Assange had been actively rooting for Trump to defeat Hillary Clinton for his own reasons, and that obviously, I think that went past the boundaries that they themselves had established, that they had openly proclaimed to follow, as in WikiLeaks and Assange himself had both said during the election and after the election that they had not been involved in the election and that they had not favored any particular candidate. And then, of course, it came out later on that, in fact, they had, that Assange, in his own words, had wanted Trump to win for particular reasons, that WikiLeaks had gotten in touch with the campaign and so on and so forth. So when that stuff came out, I was extraordinarily upset. And there was a couple of occasions in which Assange reached out to me through intermediaries to arrange a conversation so that he could, supposedly explain himself to me, and he never did so. I think the intent there was just to kind of perhaps get me back in the fold or something. But anyway, by that time I had learned a great deal more from people who had been involved with WikiLeaks in the past years and had left or whatever. And so as these other things came out in public, I grew more and more critical, openly critical of WikiLeaks. And this obviously has made things complicated.
Well, so tell us a little bit about how that was received, because I mean, I happen to follow a lot of the threads and a lot of those conversations, but I know a lot of people would have missed that. So you come out of prison, you follow what's going on and in the aftermath of the election, and you make it public that you have a very strong disagreement with how WikiLeaks has handled all of this. And what happened next?
Well, there was a lot of pushback. Assange has some very, very passionate allies still. They tend not to be the same level of people that he used to have, as in he has a dwindling pool of individuals who tend to be, I think, lower caliber than the kind of allies he had back in the day. And so there was a great deal of criticism directed at me from these remaining allies, including Kim.com, Susie Dawson, who was the head of the New Zealand Internet Party and kind of a strange figure in her own right, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, this had been a factional conflict that had already been ongoing by the time I got out of prison. Obviously, this was not the first fight between Assange and one of his former supporters. That had been going on over and over again. People like Birgitte Jonsdottir, the Icelandic member of parliament and a Pirate Party stalwart, who had been involved in WikiLeaks early on and is depicted, I think, in the movie Fifth Estate, which I've never seen. I don't think anyone else has seen it either. She had joined our board of directors for Pursuance, which we'll get into later. So there was already a tendency for people who were still wanted to be involved in some of these novel forms of net-centered activism to come on to my side gradually. And obviously that upset Assange quite a bit. Assange is easily upsettable for one thing, and that's the kind of thing that will upset him quite a bit. So. So what happened, my other connection with WikiLeaks that had been established after I was sentenced was that the Courage Foundation, an organization to assist whistleblowers, had been founded by Assange himself and his former close partner, Sarah Harrison. So this organization raised money for whistleblowers and leakers and so forth, did advocacy for them on different levels, et cetera. And after my sentencing, the Free Barrett Brown organization that had raised all the money for my defense, my legal defense, from that point, from early on until then, agreed to come under the Courage Foundation and let them run that legal fund. And I didn't receive very much money after that. I received about $3,600 in total. And I just recently learned that actually, in fact, $14,000 had been raised for me, had been donated for my benefit. Which is fine because I had voluntarily I told them that they could that my donations could go into the common pool for all beneficiaries. I had no problem with that. I understood that there was other beneficiaries, either who are still in prison or still fighting, very, very strident U.S. efforts to extradite them, as in the case of Laurie Love, who's one of our beneficiaries there. And so that's all well and good. But when I started criticizing WikiLeaks, that Courage Foundation thing was used as a cudgel against me, as in you had people who should know better, including Assange himself, out there on the internet castigating me for having turned against these people who had let me have $3,500 of my own money. So that was upsetting for me. And, obviously it served as grist for the WikiLeaks defenders. It helped them to cast me as some amoral character who had no right to be criticizing Assange, because after all, I'd done 4 years in prison, for his movement. So it's some bizarre logic at work there. But more recently, what happened recently was Assange himself, and there's some details here that I can't yet go into because I don't have, I'm working on information provided from people closer to the situation than I am, who just don't want to get into this conflict yet. Assange had expressed increasing upset over my own increasing prominence, and had basically said that Barrett Brown is trying to take over this movement, and that happened a while ago. And then more recently, the three members of the board of directors of Courage, the board of the trustees, had ordered Naomi Colvin, the director of Courage Foundation, who's an Oxford grad and does a great job and has been involved in lots of very successful activism. They ordered her to cut me off as a beneficiary. Now, that would have no practical effect on me, since I don't get any money from them, and in fact, quite the contrary. But she resigned as a matter of principle. And of course, she was already kind of unhappy with the situation she'd been put in as someone who was expected to defend Assange as a matter of course, and who could not intellectually or morally bring herself to do so. Obviously, like me, she agrees that Assange should not be extradited, that the campaign against him started well before anything he did anything controversial. It started because, not because of his vices, but for his virtues. And so, nonetheless, that's not enough for them. They demand, pretty complete obedience to whatever the Assange line is. And so she resigned, and she made that public, and that article came out. And since then, there's been quite a bit of renewed conflict among these two factions of this movement. I refer to them as the obscurantist realpolitik faction, represented by Assange, and the sort of moral candid faction, represented by us. Obviously, Assange has a certain way of doing things. He has a certain range of is a certain tool set that he uses over and over again, and these tend to involve disinformation. They tend to involve just other things that come right out of the CIA playbook, frankly, and that's why he had already lost so many valuable people up to that point. So that's basically where we are now, and so there's this larger conflict that I think needs to come to a head. I think it needs to be accelerated so it can be resolved, so we can get past it and just determine which faction is which, and are we really the same faction if we disagree on very fundamental things like transparency and whether or not it's okay to associate with, say, the alt-right.
I think those are all very valid questions, but one thing that comes out when you read the piece and when you listen to you telling the story, and this is not simply from you, but from a number of other people who have made very similar statements, and I guess I'm just going to ask it point blank. I mean, is Assange essentially making WikiLeaks and his circle within WikiLeaks into like a cult? Because that's sort of what it seems like, where he's sort of a cult leader and you basically just have to follow his directives and do, his divine will, as it were.
That's the word that comes up again and again with his detractors, some of whom have, like Birgitte Jonsdottir, have been close to him in the past and know exactly how he's like, how he functions in private, how his private utterances differ from his public utterances. Of course, we know anyone can now go and look at the 11,000 leaked chat messages between him and 9 or 10 of his online followers that came out a while back, and see for themselves how he operates, even in an unsecure medium. He is again, he engages in realpolitik. Essentially, he is the Henry Kissinger of the transparency movement, and so. That being the case, he is also, almost a Stalin type of figure, and that's obviously a very serious term to use, but it's one that becomes increasingly unavoidable as you see how they operate, and as you see the kind of people who are still willing to go to bat for him on every single issue. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a faction that is so just immune to facts, to known demonstrable facts, including the man's own utterances, as this one. It's remarkable how bad it's gotten. And, it's a shame, obviously. The whole thing is a shame because, he was in a situation at some point years ago where he did have a great deal of what you might call potential energy, like a rock on top of a cliff. There was a great deal of stuff he could have done with the moral authority he had gained by virtue of the persecution against him and by virtue of the very successful, very important things that he helps to do. And so that's always going to be the case. It's always going to be the case that the things that WikiLeaks did in the early years were very important. It's always going to be the case that their leaks, as his defenders point out, are accurate. No one is, I don't think, questioning the accuracy of the things they put out. The problem is that WikiLeaks doesn't just put out documents. It also engages in a great deal of behind-the-scenes politicking and sometimes open politicking in the public sphere. And much of that has been deleterious, demonstrably false. This thing with Seth Rich, which Assange himself perpetuated on Dutch television, in which Kim.com, his close associate, has made some claims about that I know for a fact are not true. That's just something that people can't stomach. And, there's a point at which it becomes clear again that, despite these people who want us to stop fighting, saying that we're all on the same side, well, we're really not. If you think that journalism and transparency and all that is a cudgel to be used against a certain institution and not against other institutions, which themselves must always be blameless, then no, you're not a journalist. You're not on my side. And that's obviously an increasingly common sentiment among people who, many people who used to give WikiLeaks the benefit of the doubt.
I have to say that I would put myself in that category of somebody who put a lot of value in everything that WikiLeaks was doing, and certainly defending WikiLeaks and certainly seeing Assange as not only a sympathetic figure, if not quite heroic and selfless, certainly in those early years, and especially once he was directly targeted. But the problem comes in that we have to make a separation between WikiLeaks as an institution and the function that it serves and the role that it plays and what it's done in a very tangible way, and separate that from Assange as an individual and Assange as the quote-unquote leader of WikiLeaks. And I wonder if you could comment on whether or not you found that people are unable to make that separation and whether or not that has led to animosity towards you.
Yeah, well, here's the complicating factor is that Assange is and always has been subject to a lot of disingenuous and false attacks, and also attacks just made out of ignorance or out of misunderstanding. I mean, and he was absolutely, like, he as a personality was focused upon quite a bit in the early days, and that I used to complain about that quite a bit because they were focusing more on him than on the leaks themselves, because the press, that's how the press works. I mean, that's how a lazy journalist prefers to operate. It is much easier to write a think piece about is Julian Assange this, and this than it is to go through these cables and look at Shell Oil's influence over the Nigerian government. And that's just a fact of modern journalism, unfortunately. I mean, it's always been a fact of journalism, but it becomes increasingly pronounced at different points in our history. And so that's one of those things where nuance obviously is the first casualty of this kind of era in which so much commentary is done via Twitter. It makes nuance is obviously it's hard to pull off these days. And so if I post a Twitter thing saying he should not have been talking to Donald Trump Jr. and he should not have been lying about it publicly. The next thing is, why do you like the CIA? Why are you agreeing with the deep state's attacks on Assange? Why do you want to silence him? And of course, I've already written quite a bit and said quite a bit in interviews about, how I quite to the contrary. I don't support the FBI, obviously. There's no love lost between me and the agency that threatened my mother with prosecution. But sometimes it's hard to get all that stuff in there. And in many cases, it doesn't matter if you say all that. Like I put out a statement regarding this whole affair, the other day, so that my views would be clear. And that doesn't always help. There are certain people, and there's a heavy concentration of people in that, super pro-Assange camp that are not interested in hearing that you actually do support his rights versus the state, because that is not helpful to them. That's not a narrative that can be used to paint me as, perhaps someone who has secretly made a deal with the U.S. government, which is now something that a lot of people, including like Susie Dawson, again, the head of the New Zealand Internet Party, not just some random supporter, has put out there. And that's, they have to do that because the alternative is to acknowledge that someone who is as a person who has a reputation for honesty and who did throw himself against the state and against his other pursuers very aggressively at risk to himself and at risk to his own family, has now, by virtue of the same principles, turned against him. And that's not a position they want to be in. They want to be in a position where they can attribute all criticism of Assange and of WikiLeaks, but particularly of Assange, to nefarious forces. And that's what they prefer. And there's a demographic, there's a constituency in which that kind of thing does totally work. And that's a constituency that they have left.
Indeed, and the other aspect of this that I just wanted to touch on and get your comment on is the very strange, almost, well, I can't say it's inexplicable because I could think of a number of explanations, but certainly very strange interactions and tenuous connections between WikiLeaks / Assange and the alt-right or the far right. I mean, we've heard in the press, everything from the back channel with Roger Stone to potentially, to Alex Jones and who knows what else. In other words, there is a way of looking at WikiLeaks in 2016 and since as essentially part of that world, and that's one of the real tragedies of all of this, is that there for a long time WikiLeaks was really seen as kind of objective and apart and its own thing, and now it does seem to be almost an entity of Trumpism.
Well, Glenn Greenwald, who is still tends to be a vocal supporter of WikiLeaks and a partial supporter of Assange in some ways. He also makes a lot of great points, even though I oppose him on the Russia-Trump issue. He does make a lot of good points regarding that and regarding the press's overreaching, its failures, the forces that, are the neocon forces that are obviously now in league with the resistance, et cetera. All of those things definitely need to be analyzed and discussed and looked at honestly. And in the same regard, Assange wrote a great deal of material back in the day, explaining exactly what his views were, and WikiLeaks was never really intended, even though they did sometimes paint themselves as an objective, force for just transparency against everything equally. They were always from the beginning somewhat intent on exposing what they consider to be the most dangerous powers, and they consider the U.S. government to be the most dangerous force. That's something he says over and over again, and it's something he did make clear. So they do have that defense, basically saying that, hey, this was out there years ago. We didn't just suddenly change. This has been the deal the whole time. Having said that, he's also lied considerably. He's used that whole objectivity thing. He's put that out when it suits his agenda, and he's made contradictory statements. He's been caught in lies, and so it's less of a defense when you take into account the entirety of what we now know about what he's said and what he's done and what he's meanwhile said publicly, including to his donors and supporters and to people like me who, went to bat for this.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When we talk about what we like about WikiLeaks, it was exposing the U.S. government, exposing, like you said, Shell in Nigeria, or exposing the diplomatic cables and all of the various destabilization efforts in Africa and in Latin America, and all of this information that we're still relying on today to tell stories about what's going on in the world. That's what we liked about WikiLeaks. The problem, of course, is everything that you just mentioned, and as it has evolved or devolved, I'm afraid that WikiLeaks has certainly eroded a lot of its credibility and a lot of its cachet, and that obviously hurts the movement in more ways than Assange as an individual ever could.
Right, and there's another argument that I tend to make, which is that if you're going to portray yourself as a revolutionary or a radical, an active radical, engaged in active campaigns against powerful institutions, great, but you must also accept the responsibilities of a revolutionary. You can't take that mantle and take the glory and take everything that comes with it, and then demand to be treated like a teenager when things get difficult. There's a lot of arguments that have been made openly and in private to me by close associates that, well, look, he was in this situation, he's in this embassy, and he doesn't want Clinton to win because she supposedly said she wanted to drone strike him, even though that's still unsourced. And that is not a valid argument. It's not. The point of this movement was not to protect Julian Assange from the beginning. Julian Assange was here to protect the world. That was his claim. That was his. That was why he got all these donations and support, et cetera, because he was going to be the revolutionary that came out of the last 30, 40 years of inaction and going along to get along, not fighting City Hall, the kind of sort of the Western decadence that's been occurring for so long. And he did, and instead he's proven to be soft. And that's that is indefensible to me, to be soft. Your job, if you go in for this kind of thing, if you become a revolutionary and take these responsibilities and take everything that goes with it, you also have to follow certain basic, broad rules. And trying to engineer an election in another country, in part because it benefits you personally, that is not appropriate to that pursuit.
I think that's very well said. All right, let's take a break. When we come back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about this project that you have going, because I think it's really exciting and something that everybody does need to know about, especially as we're kind of getting in on the ground level, as it were. So a lot more to discuss with Barrett Brown here on Counterpunch Radio. Thanks so much for listening. Enjoy the music. We'll be right back.
To laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help make a revolution. I'm here to laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and maybe make a revolution. Now this thing finna end in fisticuffs, but if you got to, go ahead, twist it up. That's your job finna make you piss and cuffs, make you have to hustle rent with your pistols up. Now if Uncle Sam Obama's in his murder gang, we gon' rise out the ash like that bird of flame, hoping you take action from the word I bring. But if the police ask, you never heard my name. 5 years old, eyelids half mask, bedtime is 8 p.m., it's half past. Try to take me to bed, I make the mad dash. Scared in my sleep, I miss what had passed. Quarter century later, I'm still not sleeping. If I'm not involved, I feel I ain't breathing. If I can't change the world, I ain't leaving, baby. That's the same reason you should call me this evening. To laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help make a revolution. I'm here to laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and maybe make a revolution. I'm finna take shots and make a mark, not just take shots and make us mark. That's how they make us marks. We got dry to see the whole system break apart. We finna drive to the lake and park. Before we start, here's a club smelling like sweat, rum and perfume. She letting out whoops cause they playing her tune. If we could, we would stay here till it turned noon. Till the sky we exist and resume. It's Millennium 3, we call it a cup. It's a world conversation, I'm hollering stuff like we done wallow them up and squalor enough. Who's the culprit? Follow the buck, I'm just following up. Cause like me, you got to be in the middle of it, unraveling the riddle of it. And to do that, you gon' ride on the powers of be. Well, I'm finna ride with you, take me home in a little bit. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help make a revolution. I'm here to laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and help the damn revolution come quicker. Laugh, love, fucking drink liquor, and maybe make a revolution. That's right. I'm not just Jack Jones. We up against the wall. We can't just talk about it.
And we're we're back here on Counterpunch Radio, chatting with Barrett Brown. Again, Barrett's work is I couldn't possibly recommend it more highly. You got to go to pursuanceproject.org, find out about the Pursuance Project, or rather find out more about the Pursuance Project there. But that's what I want to discuss with you right now. I mean, we definitely had our fill of the WikiLeaks and Assange question, but in many ways, Barrett, that's kind of the past, I think, and your new project, Pursuance, is at least in some sense a vision of the future of what the movement could become. So let's talk about what Pursuance is, because it's a little complicated, and I think that people need to be able to visualize it in their mind to understand just how important this is. So tell us about Pursuance. How does it work? What is it? And what gave you this idea?
So the crucial background is that we've seen a lot of successful things done using sort of these novel kinds of internet facilitated emergent activism. In the last decade and a half. Anonymous is the most obvious example. The Tunisian Revolution, some of these other assistance programs for Bahrain, this massive, very successful investigation, and in some cases thwarting of actual plots by the U.S. government and other institutions were very successful. And so from that and many other things, we can see that this can work, that it can work to bring together large numbers of people from around the world into a single online space and have them organize amongst themselves new ways of fighting back against these things and new ways of building structures to oppose the old institutions that we've inherited, from a broken and haphazard history. So we now know a great deal about the specifics of how that can work, what works best, what can go wrong, what the obstacles are, what the dangers are from existing institutions, how the government comes after these things, how private companies react to them, how friction develops among participants. And so now we're finally in a position where we can take that body of knowledge and sort of systematize it and build something that would serve as a next step. Anonymous, is a jellyfish. It is an amorphous thing. There's no charter. There's no constitution. That was in some ways to its advantage, but it also meant that there was nothing keeping it together. There was nothing preventing it from either deteriorating or turning into something else. And in fact, it did both. Anonymous is now mostly its infrastructure is largely Facebook pages with young and oftentimes very erratic and strange individuals with Guy Fawkes masks on their profiles. It's almost nothing, and to the extent it exists, a lot of it has been taken over by alt-right type of people, and that's very, very contrary to its original constituency, its original demographics. So the question is, how can we combine this? How can we take the same agility and this same really remarkable tendency to bring people together and set them to work, and allow them to do these things with that same agility, but also to develop protocols, to develop processes whereby systems of agreements are made, a series of agreements between participants, so that these things can be sustainable, so that they can grow over time without being over-encumbered and without letting in people who are working contrary to these open society goals that Anonymous originally stood for. And so Pursuance is, after a lot of thought, and I've had a lot of time to think in prison, obviously, this is a more refined version of something I was trying to put together even before Anonymous. Project PM was originally intended to create this sort of blogger cartel, a superior information sharing apparatus, and then we added onto that what we called civic networks, just non-media people, random citizens, who wanted to work together online in new ways to do clever things using information. And so this is an old model that I had. There's an old YouTube video of me when I was much younger and more innocent with a little dry erase board showing how this would work. So now we have this more refined version that's better informed by facts on the ground, better informed, with this knowledge we now have of how these things actually work in practice. It is a framework for online collaboration. It's a visualized system in which you can sort of visualize it as an ecosystem, visualize it as an ocean with little particles, molecules, little elements. These are all the individual participants. These little molecules, these little elements can come together, just like actual molecules are formed, in systematic ways to form entities, to form pursuances. These are like living organizational charts. I'm sorry to be mixing metaphors here, but sometimes I can't help myself. It's an ecosystem that can produce an infinite variety of ways by which people can join together in working relationships to do these things better, to do better the things that we already know will work, and to experiment with new methods, and to very easily and quickly perpetuate these new methods to ensure that everyone has access to the latest and best thinking on how you reform your city, how you get information out, how you engage in crowdsourced research, how you take control of the media flow, how you organize marches and demonstrations, and in some cases, revolutions. And so it's a framework whereby participants who agree with this open society philosophy and who originally, with the original population of these users being chosen by us, come into this system. They start building. All of them are equal. They can all build. They can establish their own pursuances, as we call them, their own entities. Decide what they're for. Decide how they'll grow. Decide, what the power structure is, as in how much agency do new users have, et cetera. And at the same time, anyone who disagrees with the way a pursuance is run, and there's, of course, again, infinite ways for a structure, just like any structure, to exist, any infinite combinations of, different degrees of agency, different connections. Anyone can create their own pursuance and try to do the same thing in a different way. We call this process democracy, wherein every participant starts equal and they form agreements, and from there they build more and more refined and complex structures to do certain kinds of work, and then over time those structures connect with one another to create something akin to a superorganism. This is all better understood when you look at an illustration of it, when you see some visual aids, because again, this is a visualized system by design. And it's good for all sorts of things. NGOs, nonprofits, existing institutions that want to better make use of their constituents, that want to better make use of their volunteers or would-be volunteers, can use this to very easily harness these people into self-organizing networks to do certain kinds of work. There's a book by the founder of the Pirate Party that I haven't read it, but I've seen some selections from it. And at one point, his name is like Rich Valkyrie. I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. But he's talking to a guy who runs an organization. And he tells him, your problem is not the people that work for you. Your problem is the people that want to work for you for free, but you don't let them. And so this is in part an attempt to solve that problem, to allow organizations that already exist, including city councilmen, for instance, some of whom are going to be using this, NGOs, advocacy groups, everything that's already in play in favor of the open society, to come together to vastly expand upon what they're doing without any expenditure of money or time, and with very little risk, and to better build connections among one another, while also allowing individuals who don't want to be part of a group, don't want to be part of an organization or a structure, to find one another and agree, gradually to their own makeshift sort of procedural structures for change. And all of this happens in the same place. It all happens in the same environment. And so it's going to be much easier for, say, a group that wants to take used bikes and refurbish them and send them to Africa, to find other people who have the means and the intents to do that same thing, and to more easily establish the structures necessary to do that. So this is necessarily, because it's a universal system, while at the same time we also have several key focused uses of it that we're trying to push, like crowdsourced research, online emergent activism, as well as existing NGOs. It's hard to convey everything that it is. That's why we have a website. There's been some articles in the Observer, New York, for instance, about what we're doing that might help different potential users get a sense of what they might use it for.
Absolutely. And again, I urge people to check the website, pursuanceproject.org. A lot more information there. But Barrett, help us to understand a little bit further, because you're right. It's abstract, and it does require a little bit of visualization, which I think is certainly very good on the website. But in this medium here, you and I talking to each other, people listening to just our voices, maybe it might be helpful to walk through maybe what a real world example would look like from a journalism and research perspective. So I have a story, but I only feel like maybe I have a piece of that story, and I want to kind of pursue this further and need help from other people. What do I do, and where does Pursuance come in for me?
So first, you get an invitation to Pursuance, which is, there's a number of ways to do that, but we'll skip that for now. I'd like to emphasize that this is not a content neutral platform. That we're setting this up such that this is going to be, even as it expands, even as the expansion leaves our control. Participants are the ones that bring in new users. Like participants, each new wave of participants has the ability to bring on other participants, a limited number per month. And so we've put in place a way for it to expand rapidly without that same degree of risk of it being used for purposes contrary to the open society agenda. But so as a journalist, that you come in, you find, you either find a couple of people, or you already have some in mind that you bring in that you're going to have help you with this. They'll be sort of attached to you in your pursuance. They will be, in a way, under you, is one way of doing it. Their task is to bring on others who are interested in helping you as a journalist pursue stories, or who are interested in sending you tips on stories that you may have missed. We know that people do this because it happens all the time on Twitter. We know every journalist gets tips, but the way that they get them, via email or by sort of just unregulated sort of Twitter comments, the important stories tend to get lost in the fog of nonsense. And so this apparatus helps them to get around that by allowing these people you bring on to establish these procedural networks in which any number of people can come on to this large extended network under this journalist. But that doesn't necessarily matter, because even to the extent that you've got 500 people now who have at some point attached this Pursuance, even to that extent, there's a human filter operation going on here where 90% of those people could be absolutely insane. And a portion of those could be FBI agents. But it doesn't matter, because so long as your two people that you brought on to begin with are reliable, you're only going to get the very best of that. It's being filtered through like a sand, whatever that thing is that sand goes through. I'm sure there's a term for that.
An hourglass?
No, it's a when you're mining for gold, when you're panning for gold.
Oh, yeah. I don't know.
You understand the concept.
Yeah.
So
sure.
The human filter system comes into place, and so rather than having to go through your 40 emails you got today on your Proton Mail account, much of which are nonsense, and figure out for yourself, in your own time, which of these are worth pursuing, because oftentimes it's not clear. Oftentimes, when Glenn Greenwald was approached by Edward Snowden, the reason he didn't set up the encryption apparatus at Snowden's request wasn't because he was lazy. It was because he didn't think it was going to be worth it, because the vast majority of inquiries a journalist receives are not worth it. And so under this system, had Greenwald been using this pursuance network of this sort, there would be people whose role is to sift through these things and push them forward towards Glenn Greenwald as people confirm that there's something of interest here. Now, a system like that, obviously, as it grows, there could be problems of its own. Obviously, a huge network with people on the margins sometimes means that the people on the margins might be more clever or might be more useful than the ones higher up in the network. And we get around that via a number of sort of little additions we made that we're very proud of, one of which is that the default setting on any pursuance, regardless of what it's used for, is such that anyone in a network, in a pursuance, can send one message to anyone else in the network whenever they like, about whatever they like. And if that message, if the recipient finds that message valuable, they can renew that ability for that person. And ultimately, if they'd like, they can reposition them in the network, put them closer to the core of it. That way, we get around the problem of middlemen who turn out to be incompetent or avarice-filled or whatever, and when we ensure that stuff is not lost due to size, due to overgrowth. But so the bottom line is that this is a system that takes what already happens. We already have tips coming in. You already have people providing unsolicited advice on Twitter, and allows a crowdsourced network to be very easily established without any real expenditure of time and energy by the journalist. You just have volunteers who are interested in journalism, who wants to help either. I guess I should give an example of how this would work specifically. Let's say you as a journalist, you have a story idea, your half story idea, as you mentioned. You would send down a message saying, this is what I'm interested in looking at. And so find me things about this subject, if you'd like. And people will, as that message goes down, people will respond and send stuff up. And that filters through, et cetera. And ultimately, you get a great deal of information that you would not have gotten, I guarantee, as a single journalist. The journalism model we have of journalist, an editor, and sometimes fact checker, that still derives from 17th century London, and it hasn't been fundamentally updated since. Even though journalists now use the internet in all kinds of ways, they don't really use it. They haven't really thought about, wow, what could we do with this? Because a lot of them don't care, really. A lot of them really aren't out to rock the boat. Very few of them are kept awake at night at the thought that they might not have really done that story correctly. They don't have the time. So this is not only useful way to improve journalism, it's an easy way for a journalist to do the things he's supposed to do. And that's important, because when we try to cater to journalists, we always try to make accommodations for their historical laziness.
That's good. Question for you then would be, so in my example, if I establish this pursuance for, whatever the investigative piece that I'm working on is to expose, some local candidate running in the congressional campaign, as recently happened with a piece of mine on Counterpunch, I set up this pursuance. I have this structure in place. People are sending me this information. The project, turns out well. I get a good piece and it's done. Now, does my pursuance group, or, for lack of a better word, does that stay in place for my next project? Does it change with each project? Do I have to kind of reinvent the wheel? Or how does it work in terms of evolving from project to project with a specific individual?
All of this is up to the originator of the pursuance, the person who created it, and or those he's given agency over time. And again, there's many, many ways of configuring all that. But generally in this situation, you would keep this same network of people. Now, to the extent that you started doing a very specific kind of investigation that would require specialists, you could obviously put out word using this system within the pursuance to find other people with those skills or knowledge. There's obviously a search engine you can use to search via keywords like a particular city, or a particular background or educational field or whatever. And bring those people on, and they can come on for the duration, and they can detach and go back to whatever else they were doing. A person can be a member of more than one pursuance, and in fact, many cases will be. Obviously, your journalism network, you're only going to be using it, perhaps every week or so. In the meantime, people who still want to be doing stuff, they'll also be involved in their local city pursuance, or they'll be involved in the prison reform pursuance as well. Now, that's where some more opportunities lie, because say you're doing an article on Milwaukee politics, but you're not from Milwaukee. There will be any number of pursuances that will have insight into the story that you can very easily now interface with via what we call informal connections or formal connections. So there's a number of ways, without getting into the nitty-gritty here, there's a number of ways by which to capitalize on the fact that there are huge numbers of people in this system who have a great deal of collective knowledge. There's many ways of ensuring that knowledge gets where it needs to go, and that talent and skills get where they need to be used. There will be pursuances that we refer to as crews that operate very much like a lot of people in anonymous or in just very amorphous groups like Occupy operated. In those situations, you over time learn who is good at what. and there'll be like an anonymous in the chat servers. There were channels where people who were designers hung out, and when you wanted some image, some propaganda, some pictures to go up on Twitter and proliferate in support of a campaign, you went to them and said, hey, blah, blah, we need this. So Pursuance will allow that same growing understanding of where the skills are and where real ability is to be, again, further systematized, to be made more efficient while still, maintaining the agility that makes those movements so important. And so that's the theme across the board here. It's the problem we're trying to solve is how do we know that there are millions and millions around the globe who agree with us on these basic issues and probably on more. How do we solve this problem of getting them into a cohesive body where they're still independent, where they're still, they're agreeing step by step to what they're going to do and who they're going to work with, and have the ability to, not work with those that they don't want to. How do we solve that problem? Because whoever solves that problem first, whoever truly approaches the science of arranging or allowing to be arranged large numbers of people into networks that go beyond the basic institutions that we've just kind of gotten through inertia. Whoever solves that problem, whatever faction solves that problem, whatever ideology solves that problem first, will be the one that wins in this 21st century.
Very, very interesting to put it in such stark terms, but I don't know that I can disagree with you. Now, one of the things that strikes me about Pursuance is that it's almost like an anti-social media, and what I mean by that is that for all of the, interconnectedness, quote unquote, that social media fosters, the sort of, the shrinking of the globe with Facebook and Twitter and all of that, the interconnectedness, etc., it feels that we are all the more atomized, that we are increasingly in our own little silos, no matter how interconnected we become, no matter how easy it is to communicate with people on the other side of the planet. We're not actually collaborating, we're not actually engaging in any kind of collective efforts to a large extent, but we're really just millions of individuals kind of floating around giving our ideas and opinions, and it kind of just goes off into the ether. And in that regard, it seems like Pursuance is trying to be exactly the inverse of that.
Yes, I mean, so whether it be Facebook or Twitter or the anonymous IRC channels where you have 100 people in a chat room all day, it is a chat room. The IRC networks, the IRC protocols were not designed for activism, and neither was any of this stuff. It's all designed for spending time on whatever, and that's generally takes the form of wasting time. So this is a system that has been designed with that in mind. Like I've always been less concerned with governments and private sector infiltration by bad actors than I have been with the people who are well-intended but don't belong there, or people who are actually good at what they do, but when you put them in certain media, in certain situations, there's a tendency to slack off and gossip and get in fights. So this is designed to allow people to come together, but not too closely. It's designed in a way such that this is not something that lends itself to time wasting. It's something that via a number of mechanisms that we probably don't need to go into here perpetuates and encourages activity. It rewards activity. It does not reward popularity or being a great raconteur. It rewards. There are ways in which an individual participant has their profile. There are ways in which people who are interviewing potential participants in their pursuance, if that's how they have it set up. A pursuance can have, it can be set that such that anyone can join if they'd like. I don't recommend it, but we do. That is something, that is a possibility. But when you are about to work with someone, or considering working with someone, or considering joining a pursuance, you can see, in most cases, unless it's set for very private, high-end, secure work, you can see what stuff they've done in the past, and you can see what ratings, what comments they've gotten from people that are verified to have worked with them. At the same time, and that's something we've had to think long and hard about, like a lot of this, because we're always trying to find the right balance of transparency between individuals and security. And that's why so much of this is up to the user. That's why, like, when you set up a pursuance, you can decide, most of these pursuances are going to be doing pretty mundane, not that really dramatic, exciting stuff. They'll be doing, the hard work of fighting for open societies. And those pursuances are going to be these visible structures that you can see, and you can see how it's connected and what kind of work is being done and how. And that makes it easier for, say, an NGO that may be situated a block away, on a San Francisco city block with another NGO, but doesn't really have a great way to interface with that NGO and see exactly where the potential areas of, congruent alliance might be. It's gonna facilitate the discovering of that information, the discovering of, here's their logistics program they have to move bikes to Africa, and here's what we have. So now here's an obvious area of congruence that we should approach them about. It's going to help solve that problem. It's also going to, bring back freedom of association in all senses, as in you're also free not to associate. And that's important. That's important for a number of reasons. Partly due to the fact that we have lots of groups out there like the Green Party and Libertarians who, if they worked together, could have helped solve a lot of these prison reform and drug reform problems a long time ago, but keep getting in fights over other things. So this is very much geared towards promoting the united beliefs of its constituents, rather than allowing their differences to overwhelm those things. The other major aspect of this I should note is that you mentioned the term reinventing the wheel earlier. In the case of the journalist setting up pursuance, there's a central data library. We'll think of a catchier name for it later, but anytime anyone creates a pursuance or creates a structure of pursuance or any kind of element of pursuance, they can make a copy of it and submit it to the central data library and say, yes, this structure, this workflow, this works really very well for this kind of task. And you'll annotate it and say exactly, here's how it was set up. Here's what you can see what it looks like. Here's how this worked and why. Here were some problems that may have arisen, blah, blah, and submit it. And so anyone coming into the pursuance system who may be great at what they do, but don't have the capacity or don't have the interest in studying human networks, will have these huge number of templates that they can search through by keyword or whatever that do things similar to what they want to do. Now they can take that, use it, and perhaps refine it, modify it, improve upon it. And then they can take a copy of that and put it back in the library. And so this is a system that evolves on several different fronts, and that's one of them.
I know we're not going to get into all of the nitty gritty here, and we're rapidly running out of time, but I do want to just follow up on something else that I think is really noteworthy here, and it has to do with the word. I think you've used it in the conversation so far, but I know that you've used it in other contexts, and that's accountability. And you've mentioned these procedural agreements that are made among the members of a pursuance, and I guess I'd like to understand a little bit more. In a little bit more detail, what exactly that looks like. What are these agreements, and exactly how do they provide a measure of accountability in the pursuance world?
Well, that's one of the things that that's another big questions we've had, and we've gotten a lot of questions about, how are you going to prevent people from misusing this, or how are you going to, facilitate this, or should you guys be overseeing everything? And the answer is that we are going to take, just like with any medium, the telephone, Facebook, email. We actually have less to answer for in so much as how these things will be used, because, again, we are taking steps to ensure that a certain kind of person is using it to begin with, and that a certain kind of person will end up populating it further, because those people that we seed it with, so to speak, will be choosing the next people and so forth. And so obviously, as that process continues, you're going to increasingly be subject to people coming in who don't belong there, but they're going to find it very difficult to actually join a pursuance or to recruit for their own, because they will be sort of out of step with the general ideology of the existing members who themselves have already set up these complicated pursuances. Beyond that, so it's an end-to-end encrypted platform, which is very important, particularly for some of our constituents, people, reformers in the Arab world, for instance, some of whom we've met with at some of the conferences we've attended in the last year or so. We were at RightsCon in Toronto, Hope in New York a couple weeks back. These are people who are now, some of them are using Facebook still, just like they did in Tunisia. They're using Facebook by necessity, because they have to make the choice every day between, am I going to speak securely with a few people I know over Signal, or somewhat less securely over Slack, or not securely at all via Facebook. Because if they use Facebook, they do have the ability to recruit large numbers of people and get their message out. But they face increasing security concerns in life and death situations. So all of this is very customizable, and so by necessity, with the end-to-end encryption and the zero-knowledge platforms that we have written into this, that don't retain information and can't be subpoenaed or acquired by a government. By making it like that, it means that we also cannot control how it's used. But that's very similar with, say, the internet itself. But again, since we have made it non-content neutral, and since we are seeding this world essentially like an early god who then steps back, we're pointing in a certain direction, a direction that we can expect. We can generally guarantee that the great majority of what happens with this will be things that should happen. And so you always encounter risks. You always encounter these questions that Facebook and Twitter are now answering about. What is their responsibility in creating a platform and letting people use it? We avoid those by reminding everyone that we are here to create an open source platform, for a constituency, and that we do not feel ourselves to be, we are not capable of overseeing it in some omniscient way. And if we did that, we would be in danger of becoming, down the line, something akin to the same things we're fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the takeaway from all of this is that Barrett Brown considers himself a god.
Absolutely. But a god sets things in motion, and then becomes absent, like an absent father.
So like actual God.
Yeah, like a deadbeat dad.
Okay. Well, we're pretty much out of time, but I want to just give you a chance. Tell people, where do they go to find more information? I mean, obviously, I've given out the website. Is there any other materials, resources, or information that you think people need to know about Pursuance, about your work, anything else that you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at @BarrettBrown_, and I tend to link to a lot of the articles and the video presentations and the talks and speeches we've given about Pursuance and various aspects of it. There's going to be a lot more of that coming soon, because this is something that's so hard to explain that we have to give it a number of tries, and we're still refining that. You can Google Pursuance, or and with different keyword combinations to find out about how Pursuance can be used for journalists, how it can be used for NGOs. There's a lot of written materials out there. There's some articles by other parties with their take on how it should be used and how it will evolve. There's a lot of video presentations that we've given at conferences on YouTube. And that's basically the best way to approach it. The pursuanceproject.org website has a lot of links to these same articles and things, so that's a good place to start.
Excellent. Barrett, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing for Pursuance, and for all of the work that you've done, and of course for the tremendous sacrifice that you made, which I think really does need to be, people do need to be reminded of that. I mean, you made about the biggest sacrifice that a person could make for the cause that you're dedicated to, and I think that is noteworthy, and I think that that's something to to champion. So thank you for all that work. Thank you for Pursuance, and thanks for coming on the show. Listeners, thank you as always for the continued support, and I'll speak to you again